Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Really glad to have back District 1 Republican in the great state of Florida. It is the firebrand himself. It's Matt Gaetz. Matt, how are you?
Oh, great to be back with you, Joe. And I was just reflecting, you look a lot more clean cut than usual. Usually, like, the Joe Pags experience includes like that tough like goatee.
That's
or
right.
Sometimes like the wild hair, but something must be going on where you've got it all tidied up this great day.
You know why, Matt? Because you were on the way, and I got to make it look good for the firebrand, and I just did a little TV. That had nothing to do with it, though. It had to do with this interview. Matt, I got to ask you, man. I'm a huge supporter. I love your fight. I love that you don't back down. But the left has to be saying this. They have to be. What the hell do we have to do to Matt Gaetz to make him go away? Why won't you go away? I mean, lesser people with lesser backbone, Matt, would have been out of the spotlight immediately and hiding in the background. You're not.
Yeah, I guess the rumors of my demise are greatly exaggerated. Right. I was greatly inspired during the presidency of Donald Trump to never let the process be the punishment. Donald Trump was willing our economy out of the doldrums to provide people success and higher wages and ambition and hope. All the while, he was being accused by the Department of Justice, the Mueller team, Democrats, even some Republicans, of being an agent of the Russian Federation.
Right.
And I saw the way he brought just a can-do spirit and a will to public service. And honestly, that'll inspire me my entire life. So I know they're doing their very best to try to smear me and lie about me, but here we are fighting every day for the great folks in the country. And honestly, there's a lot still to battle over for the success of our people. I see a Democrat Party that is embracing these policies that crush our economy, drive inflation. They have launched a war on work that is unprecedented, paying people to stay home, having vaccine mandates that limit people's ability to contribute to our economic system. So I've got more piss and vinegar than ever, and I love coming to work every day and battling for this great country's future.
And we love the battle. We love that you're out there in front, Matt. It's Matt Gaetz, District 1 Republican, the great state of Florida. Let me get this out of the way because I want to get into some other stuff that I feel is more important. The left media is reporting that some ex-girlfriend or something got an immunity. She's going to talk to the grand jury, and the reporters aren't reporting the story. Now, you've come on my show many times. You said this didn't happen. I dare them to show proof. The guy who actually tried to blackmail your family is admitting it. He's going to go to jail. But the way the reporters in the media, the left media that hate you, are reporting this is, and that could mean, so they're saying what happened, she got immunity or so she gets to talk to them, whatever. But then they say, and this could mean it's the next step to prosecute, could mean it's the next step to charging him. Matt, that's irresponsible. It's not really journalism. It's somebody out to get Matt Gaetz pretending to be a reporter or a journalist. But how do you let that go off your back? You've got to pay attention to that. There really is a grand jury, and they really are investigating something.
Well, I don't know what I don't know. What I can say is that there's only been one charge, and it was a charge against the people who were trying to extort me on a pile of lies. There's only been one conviction, and it was a guilty plea of the man who was trying to shake my family down for $25 million. And oddly, he was trying to shake my family down to try to execute a strategy that Robert Mueller had brought to a Russian oligarch back when Robert Mueller was the director of the FBI. So it sort of feels like a deep state Mad Lib. Look, I think there are a lot of Americans who are rightly concerned about politicization at the Department of Justice. And not just under Merrick Garland. Frankly, even under Donald Trump, we saw a DOJ that was less interested in finding the truth and investigating crimes and more interested in becoming the political enforcement wing of the political left in this country. We just had Martin Luther King Day, and I recall reading all of these just horrific stories of how J. Edgar Hoover would use the national security apparatus to try to target politics he didn't like. Now, that was back when the FBI and DOJ were right-wing, and they targeted people who they thought were left-wing provokers. And now we see a DOJ and an FBI, no matter who the president is, that has really leaned into leftist politics. So I don't know what they're up to. I do know that we got important work here in the Congress, and that the things I've been accused of are verifiably false. As I sit here and chat with you, Joe, I got fewer accusers than Joe Biden.
That's true.
There's an actual human being who's accused Joe Biden of wrongdoing.
Right.
No one has done that as it relates to any of my conduct. So I do kind of let it just go off my back like the water off of a duck.
And again, Matt, I appreciate you being strong and fighting hard for America and for freedom. The left media, if they're going to talk about you, though, is always going to be negative. And I'm glad that you've got the foundation to deal with it. It's Matt Gaetz, District 1 Republican, the great state of Florida. You talked about the turnabout from the Department of Justice back then to what they're doing now. Isn't there any way, Matt, we can depoliticize the Department of Justice? Shouldn't they just enforce the laws? Shouldn't they just go by the book? Why is there any political activist at all holding a job in the FBI or the DOJ at all? Can't we do something about it?
We might have to get them outside of the beltway of Washington, D.C. I think most Americans acknowledge that agencies in Washington typically want to grow their power. There's no one in an agency, whether it's the Department of Labor or the EPA, saying, gosh, I wonder if we had less of a profile, less of a portfolio. And the way agencies grow is typically by helping their friends and punishing their enemies and their critics. And a lot of folks want to believe that the Department of Justice is somehow exempt from this. They're above it. They don't do the normal politics that you might see at the Department of Education pushing critical race theory or the Department of Labor pushing union policy. But the reality is they're not just a part of that ecosystem. In many circumstances, they are the worst actors. I mean, we just had a circumstance where the FBI wouldn't classify the motive of a political radical Islamist who went into a synagogue, took hostages, demanding the release of someone who was colloquially referred to as Lady Al-Qaeda.
Right.
So they couldn't figure that motive out. They had to say it was undetermined. Yet when there was a garage pull rope in a NASCAR driver's garage, they had to deploy more than a dozen agents. When parents spoke out against critical race theory and against mandates in schools, they were labeled domestic terrorists. So I do think that the rot runs very deep at many of these agencies, and the DOJ isn't exempt. There have been more and more calls for Republicans to lay out a plan to oversee and reform the FBI, the National Security Apparatus, the Department of Justice. Congressman Jim Jordan is slated to be the next chairman of the House Judiciary Committee if we take power. He has committed publicly on my podcast Firebrand to create an oversight and investigations subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee, and I plan to chair it. And I plan to get answers, and I plan to drive reforms there, because the American people do deserve law enforcement that investigates crimes and that doesn't try to pervert the law to go after political movements or political actors that they fear, whether they are in Congress or in the school boards throughout our great nation.
And that attack on the synagogue happened here in Texas. The guy was live streaming it as he was holding people hostage on the Sabbath at that synagogue. And on the live stream, he's yelling religious things. And you're right. The FBI says, well, we see no tie to religion here. And then the AP reports, the FBI says, this has nothing to do with it being a synagogue or that the people are Jewish, which is ridiculous. Of course it is. The woman that he wanted to get released was known as Lady Al-Qaeda, yes, but also known as Lady Anti-Semite. So at the end of the day, they were trying to hide it to make a situation look better, when I just want them to be the Department of Justice. I just want the media to be really fair reporters, and they're not. It's District 1 Republican, the great state of Florida. It's Matt Gaetz. Firebranded is his book. Go and get it. Firebranded is his podcast. Go and watch it. He's got Jim Jordan on there all the time. Marjorie Taylor Greene is on there all the time. And the information that you give directly to the American people is so valuable. Go to Rumble, find his Firebrand podcast. 7% inflation, Matt. We've got, my wife bought some ribs, a rack of ribs, before the meat prices went nuts, and ended up, to get a second rack, ended up paying $4 or $5 more for the same exact thing just a couple of 3 weeks later. The gas prices are through the roof. They went down for a second because we released the strategic reserves for no reason to make Biden look better. Now they want to spend even more money because the promise is that if you let us do the Build Back Better BS, then we somehow will make inflation go away if we spend trillions of more of your dollars. They don't think we're going to buy that, do they? I mean, even on the left, the most moderate lefties, the Democrats are going, dude, this guy really messed things up. They don't think Americans will buy that, do they?
Well, they are stuck with the economic reality that they have created by embracing policies that damage the supply chain, that drive up inflation, and that limit the buying power of consumers. Joe, I really hope you didn't eat that rack of ribs. You should probably keep it, because the ribs may actually hold their value better than the American dollar that you have in your pocket. I mean, this is not like complicated economic theory. If just printing more money made your nation stronger, Zimbabwe would be the strongest country in the world.
Right.
But they aren't, and it doesn't. And I think it's really important to question a lot of the legislative ambitions that this Democrat Congress still has. Though they weren't able to get Build Back Better, they are still working every day here in Washington to try to create new federal programs that are never ending, that create mandatory spending, and ultimately we all pay that bill. In the days of Grover Norquist, it was all about don't let them tax us more. They can't raise taxes. But now it's more about the monetary policies that make the dollars in your pocket worth less, and that crushes working class people, middle class people the most.
Gaetz.house.gov/firebrand. Go there right now. It's U.S. Representative Matt Gaetz. Do you take any silent pleasure, any quiet pleasure in your most private times to Manchin and Sinema being called racist and being attacked by their own party because they dare take the same stance Schumer and Obama and Biden took in 2005?
Yeah, it really is something to watch the circular firing squad that seems to be forming among Democrats in Congress. And sometimes it's scary, Joe, to think that like the nation is being held together by one Joe Manchin and one Kyrsten Sinema because they are the backstop against just an unending stream of policies that draw America into a state of socialist tailspin, economically, socially, culturally, and otherwise. And so we certainly encourage the senators who are trying to provide any pushback to this dangerous agenda, no matter where they may come from. And I saw the recent news creating a lot of scuttlebutt on the Hill today that Bernie Sanders may be recruiting a primary challenge to Joe Manchin. So it'll be interesting to see Bernie trade the mountains of Vermont for the mountains of West Virginia. My expectation there is that a Bernie Sanders flavored politics is probably not what would be successful in a statewide election in West Virginia.
I think those who are watching and listening, Matt, are wondering, can you, the Republicans, the conservatives, those who love American values, can you do anything before the next election? Can you do anything to turn the tide on jobs and people not going back to work, or on the economy just really stinking and inflation through the roof? Can you do anything to stop the overwhelming power grab by people like Nancy Pelosi who want this stupid Voting Rights Act, which is really just a power and control move by the left? Is there, or is it really, well, we really can't do anything until you give us the House back. Can't do anything until you give us the Senate back. Are we in that position, or can you do something?
I'm just hoping we're able to do something when we do get the House and Senate back. I mean, I served here for 2 years under Paul Ryan, where we were not making a great deal of progress, and we actually had control of the place. And so I want to use these next 2 years to inspire Republicans to be the best, most inspirational versions of ourselves to the country, to show Americans that if we get the House, we won't just twiddle our thumbs and wring our hands. We'll actually do the critical oversight to expose how these policies are actually contributing to the pain that the American people are feeling. Now, to do that, we're going to have the right types of campaigns and the right types of candidacies around the country. But the wins that freedom has achieved have not come from the halls of Congress, but courthouses, where the SEALs case gave some comfort to some military families dealing with this vaccine mandate, where the OSHA mandate was struck down. So we still need courageous judges to actually stand up in an embrace of freedom and our constitutional principles. And we've got to get back in power to be able to do the necessary oversight. But I don't take it as an article of faith that if we get power, we'll do right by the American people. We've got to earn that.
Very well said. Firebrand is the book. Firebrand is the podcast. One last question with U.S. Representative Matt Gaetz. Matt, as these fruitless investigations into you continue, as the ridiculous Kabuki theater continues into January 6th, we're hearing things about Nancy Pelosi being worth $250 million. We're hearing about her investing in things that she has oversight in investigating and in bringing to the floor items that could keep social media, for example, in check. Will there be investigations into Nancy Pelosi? Will there be investigations into Liz Cheney and this Kinzinger guy? I mean, what they're doing is so opposite of what I thought representation was supposed to be. They're clearly looking out for their own personal agendas, and they're not looking out for the American people. Will there be an investigation into why Nancy Pelosi is worth $250 million?
There should be, and we should also change the laws so that members of Congress aren't trading stocks where they may have inside information. I think the American people understand that that's a pretty basic decision that you should make. Should you be on the side of stock investing or should you be on the side of federal lawmaking? You probably shouldn't be on the side of both. And certainly Nancy Pelosi's family has benefited from being on both sides of that line. And Democrats and their puppets like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger have certainly been very willing to target not issues or legislation, but members of the Republican Party they don't like Jim Jordan, like Scott Perry, like myself. And I do think when we get power, we shouldn't be so austere as to avoid the investigations that would show not only the financial corruption by Democrats, but the actual money moving that occurred during the summer of 2020, where Democrat members of Congress were actively contributing to the violence and the riots and the destruction of property that shook this nation. That should never happen again, and we have to expose the Squad and any other member of Congress, and frankly, even the Vice President of the United States, for their direct involvement in that very, very disgusting activity.
100%. Go to gates.house.gov/firebrand. Get his book, Firebrand. Check out his podcast is amazing. Don't ever leave Congress. You'd be taking my job. Knock it off.
Hey, man, we should do something together. We should collaborate
100%.
sometime, Joe.
Anytime. Well, we just did, but I certainly would like to do it long form as well. Go and check out his podcast. It's amazing. The guests he has on and the insights that you get from Congress that the media won't tell you about are second to none. Matt, thanks a million. I appreciate you.
Hey, great to be back on with you, but I expect next time I'm on, you'll have some element of your physical appearance that will show that kind of like rough New Yorker out in exile in Texas.
Yeah, I'm gonna wear a tank top or something. Matt, thanks a million, buddy. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Joe.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. We're back after this. Stay right here.